or the Israelis have said that they have been moving into southern Lebanon, but there's nothing about that to make it sound as though it's any different from what we've been hearing over the past several days and weeks. So we're at a critical impasse here. Is this a real paradigm shift in the conflict that we've been seeing over the past year? Is this an appreciable increase in the offensive that we've been seeing over the past 2 weeks that is mostly, almost entirely focused on air-to-ground attacks by the Israelis that have decapitated Hezbollah and in several unusual episodes exploded pagers and walkie-talkies that have maimed and killed a lot of the Hezbollah commandos? Only the next couple hours and days will tell. Willie?
Yes, a new phase here. NBC's Matt Bradley live from Beirut in Lebanon. Matt, thanks so much. So, Richard Haass, this does come at the end of a couple of extraordinary weeks of Israel on the offensive against Hezbollah. The pagers, the walkie-talkies, the airstrike that killed Nasrallah, who had been a target of theirs for many decades, and now apparently a ground incursion. What does this signal to you?
Look, what the Israelis want to do is be able to move 60, 70,000 of their citizens back to their homes in northern Israel. There's only two ways to do it. Either you push Hezbollah far, far back, 20, 30 miles back beyond the range of a lot of their systems, or you persuade Hezbollah that wherever they are, to attack Israel is a dangerous undertaking. The latter makes more sense because Israel doesn't want to occupy Lebanon again. Been there, done that. If you leave, they can always bring forces back. So the real question is whether you can change the calculus of Hezbollah directly or conceivably their masters or their partners in Tehran. And I think that's what the Israelis are trying to do, to essentially deter them from using the systems they have, because you can't eliminate all their systems. You can't prevent 100% resupply. So I think what this is about is changing the calculus of Hezbollah and possibly setting up some type of a new informal modus vivendi.
Now, let's not forget that Hezbollah has been attacking civilians in northern Israel since October the 8th, after the attacks of October 7th. So what is your sense of what these last couple of weeks have done, not just as a practical question, but to the psyche of Hezbollah? If Israel has completely decapitated its leadership, shown that it can strike them in their hip pockets, what does that mean?
I think, well, just what you suggest. It's obviously put them back on their heels. The idea that Hezbollah and Israel had reached some type of an understanding, unpeaceful coexistence, if you will, I think that's been shattered. The Israelis essentially said, we're not going to play that game anymore. So they have really, really hurt Hezbollah, weakened it dramatically. Eliminated it? No, that's not possible. I think it's also sent a big message to Tehran that the idea that your proxies, you can operate through them, and again, there's certain ceilings on what Israel's willing to do. It's shattered that assumption. Also, I think it's actually restrained Iran. I think it sent a message to them that you're not safe. Your leadership isn't necessarily safe and all that. So I think what the Israelis are trying to do is change the rules of the road in the Middle East. It doesn't eliminate the threats they face from the Houthis, Hezbollah, Hamas, much less from Iran. But I think it's to change the calculus and give them a little bit more space. And they may have succeeded at that for a while.
So over the last couple of days, Caddy, U.S. officials telling me certainly no tears shed for Nasrallah, who had a lot of blood on his hands, including American blood. But there are concerns about a wider war, questions, though, about what Tehran may or may not do in response. But we heard from President Biden yesterday, even as U.S. officials sort of grateful that Hezbollah has been weakened, President very clear that he was tied, said, look, we need a ceasefire now. He does not want this to spiral any further than it already has. Hours later, Israel went into Lebanon, it appears. So this is another moment where Prime Minister Netanyahu and the Israeli government have taken the U.S. advice and ignored it. So speak to us a little bit about the limits of American power and also what could come next in this conflict.
Ever since October the 7th, I've been hearing from people in the Middle East that time and again they have been struck by the fact that the United States is not omnipotent in the way that it used to be in that region, that it can push for certain things, but those things don't necessarily materialize. It has continuously pushed for a ceasefire around Gaza. It hasn't happened. It can push Israel and Benjamin Netanyahu not to go into Lebanon, but it looks like overnight that is exactly what the Israelis have done, albeit in a limited way. I think the kind of bigger picture, and it gets to what Richard is saying, is that how much is enough for Israel? How much does Israel feel it needs to do in Lebanon? We know that there are tunnels, there are facilities on that southern Lebanese border with Israel. Israel has now spent a year trying to eliminate tunnel networks in Gaza. It hasn't succeeded in doing so. What does it need to do in southern Lebanon for its people to feel safe that they can live along that border? And, of course, as this fighting continues, it may have won Israel a little bit more maneuvering room kind of in the Middle East more generally at the moment. But it's not the political solution, which I think the administration here would say certainly is what eventually is needed for not just the Israelis, but the Lebanese and the Palestinians to feel safe.
And, Willie, it also depends on the definition of limited, which is Israel says they're going to do. They did this. They used that word quite a bit in Gaza as well, and then proceeded to change that definition as they went forward.
Yeah, I mean, Richard, you touched on this a minute ago, but if you are sitting in Iran, in the leadership, you're watching this play out right now, watching what Israel has done in Gaza, what it's now doing in Lebanon. I wonder what you're thinking strategically. There's been this concern that there would be direct war between Israel and Iran, that the United States would be drawn into it. Prime Minister Netanyahu did say, addressing the Iranian people yesterday, when Iran is finally free, and that moment will come a lot sooner than people think, suggesting, you tell me. But if you're Iran, what are you thinking right now?
Iran has to be careful. If you remember, Willie, last April, Israel demonstrated its ability to penetrate Iranian airspace and pretty much do what it wanted to do. So the Iranians have to be really careful about not giving Israel a pretext or an opening to attack it directly. Israel could go after their energy infrastructure, could go after aspects of their nuclear program. It could do things to really weaken the regime. Which is what the Prime Minister, Mr. Netanyahu is getting at. The Iranian leadership has to be careful here, not to take things beyond a certain point. So I think this poses a real dilemma to the people in Iran. They don't like leaving their buddies in Hezbollah, the rest in the lurch. Iran is supposed to be this force, that backs all of its proxies. On the other hand, if they get involved directly, I think there are many in Israel who are ready to bring the war to Iran. And the Iranians know that's not a war they can win directly. Now, they could do terrorism and sabotage all over the world. The war won't be necessarily a traditional battlefield war. But my guess is they are calculating very carefully, particularly the new president of Iran. Again, not clear how much authority he has here. But they are calculating, because escalation, I would say, does not serve Iranian interests right now. But so their dilemma is, how do they back their proxies without getting pulled into a war directly that they can't prevail over against Israel? So right now, everybody is calculating. But Katie makes a really good point, which is, what is the Israeli definition of success here? They can hurt Hezbollah. They can maybe push them back temporarily. But what are they trying to accomplish here? And again, I don't think it's physically removing the threat. I think they are trying to change the thinking in Tehran and Hezbollah so people suddenly act with greater restraint towards Israel. I think that's what this is about.
Part of it's psychological. Fascinating and dangerous dynamics at play here. President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass. Richard, thanks as always. Appreciate it. This morning, tens of thousands of dock workers are on strike at major ports from Maine to Texas. It comes after the industry's largest union failed to reach an agreement with the United States Maritime Alliance, the group that represents port management. CNBC is reporting preparations for a strike have been underway in 14 American cities following a protracted battle over wage increases and the use of automation. Now, billions of dollars in trade has been stranded as the International Longshoremen's Association launches its first strike since 1977. Let's bring in the anchor of CNBC's Worldwide Exchange, Frank Holland. Frank, what more do we know about this?
Hey, good morning, Willie. Well, we know the two sides, as you mentioned, the Longshoremen's Union, the ILA, and the port operators known as USMX. They traded counteroffers over pay yesterday. Also, the White House has taken additional steps to facilitate, again, not mediate, but just facilitate these talks, while still maintaining they would not use the Taft-Hartley Act to keep the ports open and force continued negotiations. Also new this morning on social media, there's a video from the ILA president making what I'm going to call a fiery speech to members about these contentious negotiations with port operators. He went on to say, in part, we're going to keep this thing going every day. We're going to be in and out. We're going to be on the news. And he goes on to tell the members, there's some profanity in there, but saying that they're going to win this thing. He tells them to trust them and saying that the port operators can't last very long. USMX, the port operators, they're also out with a statement yesterday kind of spelling out some of the details of the negotiations. they say that they offered nearly a 50% pay increase in addition to tripling employer contributions to retirement plans and also strengthening health care. And also they said they were offered to retain the current language around automation and semi-automation, really a key issue when it comes to these negotiations.
All right, CNBC's Frank Holland. Frank, so much. Appreciate it. You'll be keeping close tabs on this. We'll check back in with you. So, Jonathan Lemire, this is the White House obviously is invested in this and monitoring it closely. Don't want this to go on too long. As I said, these ports have been prepared for this, especially with the busy holiday shopping season and all the supply chain questions that come in. But it does add another layer to this presidential race, yet another issue.
It certainly does. As Frank said, the White House at this point, not directly involved. They're facilitating. They're not intervening. This, of course, President Biden has deemed himself the most pro-labor president in history. So they're watching this carefully. And there are concerns. I was told yesterday, the most analysts in the White House and some outside economists believe that if this just lasts a few days, no real impact. But if it stretches beyond a week or more, there will be a ripple effect that could impact the national economy just at a moment when inflation has started to cool, when we had a Federal Reserve rate cut, when certainly people are feeling good about the economy right now. And this could create a wave of bad headlines, not just for this current administration, but of course for Vice President Harris.
Coming up, Steve Ratner is charting the money race ahead of the presidential election. We'll have a look at how much the campaigns are bringing in straight ahead on Morning Joe.
The Oracle Jet sets the new standard in automation, performance and speed. Powered by the ThermoJet heating system, it's ready in seconds. Select from cafe favorites, including refreshing new cold coffees. Auto grind, dose and tamp for a well-balanced extraction. And automatically texture milk for silky smooth microfoam. It's the benchmark redefined from Breville.
Who am I?
Who am I?
I'm an anchor at MSNBC.
I am a passionate journalist.
I am curious and committed.
I am a great listener, and I have a lot of questions. I'm Cuban American.
A lover of world cuisine, especialmente comida mexicana.
I am bilingual and bicultural.
I am a proud Latina.
I am
all that
I am.
Hispanic heritage.
Celebrating all that we are.
The death toll this morning from Helene continues to rise across 6 states after that devastating storm ripped through the southeast. This morning, at least 125 people are dead in Florida, Georgia, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Virginia. A third of those deaths reported in North Carolina, where at least 40 people died as a result of catastrophic flooding, leaving entire communities, some of them swept away, others under several feet of water, hundreds more people still missing. Millions of customers also remaining in the dark across those states. Rescue operations underway as families desperately wait to hear back from missing loved ones. Tomorrow, President Biden will take part in an aerial tour of Asheville, North Carolina, to survey the mind-bending damage that you see in these pictures. Joining us now from Erwin, Tennessee, NBC News correspondent Priscilla Thompson. Priscilla, good morning. So what's the latest on the recovery efforts there, but also across the border in North Carolina?
Yeah, Willie, well, as we enter day 4 of recovery here, there are 100 responders out searching through rubble, trying to find any signs of life that they can. As they say, the mission here is shifting from rescue to recovery, and the mission is intensifying to find those